Karoline walked into court to clear her name. Instead she uncovered a conflict of interest so massive the judge had to be removed mid-hearing. You could tell by the way he leaned back in his chair that Judge Ronald Pierce already had his mind made up. The courtroom in Manchester, New Hampshire wasn't anything grand, just rows of wooden benches, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a dusty flag pinned to the back wall, but Judge Pierce treated it like his personal stage. The gavel wasn't a tool, it was a prop. And today he was ready to perform. Karoline Leavitt walked in just before 10 a.m. calm, sharp, and maybe even a little too quiet for his taste. She carried a slim folder and wore a navy suit that made her look more like an analyst than a plaintiff, but there was something about the way she walked like she had already lived through worse and wasn't here to impress anyone. Judge Pierce glanced down at her name on the docket, squinting slightly. "Ah yes, Miss Leavitt, the woman with a reputation problem," he said. Loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear. The people in the pews, mostly students from a local college doing courtroom observation, shifted uncomfortably. Karoline didn't flinch. "I'm here to give my statement, Your Honor," she replied evenly, without so much as a blink. "Oh, of course," he said, cracking a smile. "Let's hear what you have to say about how someone allegedly ruined your precious little career." Her attorney, Malcolm Reyes, a reserved man from Lowell, stood up. "Your Honor, we'd appreciate a respectful tone. This is a defamation hearing." Pierce didn't even look at him. "Save it, counselor. I'll run my courtroom the way I see fit." And just like that, the tone was set. One part intimidation, one part performance. Karoline took the stand. The clerk swore her in. She adjusted the MEC. Reyes passed her a single page to begin her statement, but she didn't read from it. She looked straight ahead, past the judge, past the lawyers, past the rows of eyes studying her. "I came here today not to defend my reputation," she said. "That part's already been dragged through enough. I came here to tell the truth, because if I don't, I'm no better than the people who lied in the first place." Pierce gave a lazy smirk. "Admirable, but let's not turn this into a movie script." The court reporter typed steadily, barely lifting her eyes from the machine. Karoline continued, her voice steady. "Last year, after I left my role with a communications firm and conquered a former colleague, someone with ties to the defendant began spreading claims that I had falsified press statements and manipulated campaign data. I lost 2 contracts in a week. My landlord raised suspicions about my lease. I stopped being invited to local briefings. No one wanted their name attached to mine." Pierce leaned back in his chair, twirling a pen in his fingers. "And you're saying all this stemmed from a single comment made with the defendant at a fundraiser?" "Yes," Karoline answered without pause, "because it wasn't just a comment. It was a calculated statement, and it was false." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Interesting." Malcolm Ray rose again. "We'll provide context, Your Honor, along with witness statements and a timeline, but if we may." Pierce waved him off. "You'll get your chance, counselor." There was a pause. Tension clung to the air. Karoline stayed silent, waiting for the judge to let her finish, but he didn't. Instead, he scribbled something on a yellow legal pad, chuckled quietly, and then muttered, "This should be fun." That's when Karoline looked at him. Not just looked, but saw him. The arrogance, the power he thought he had, and something else too, a tiny trace of fear, like he knew this wasn't going to be the easy win he expected. But before he could cut her off again, Karoline's attorney reached into his briefcase and placed a sealed folder on the bench, one the judge didn't see coming. The folder sat untouched on the judge's bench, its tab marked only with the initials KL42. Judge Pierce glanced at it briefly, then looked back at Karoline like it was some kind of bluff. "Go ahead," he said, leaning forward. "Finish your story." Karoline didn't waste time. She knew what she came for. She took a breath and started speaking, not with dramatics, but with the quiet precision of someone who practiced every word in her kitchen alone at 2 a.m. "The fundraiser wasn't a coincidence," she said. "Neither was the timing of what was said about me. The man who made those comments, Jeremy Bellamy, isn't just a friend of the defendant. He was in line for a major contract with her company. The smear helped lock in that deal. My name was just collateral." Judge Pierce sighed and glanced at the clock. "So your claim is that a passing comment at a social event triggered a domino effect that ruined your reputation, and you believe this court should hold the defendant financially responsible?" "No," Karoline replied. "I believe this court should hear the full story before deciding what's worth accountability." The gallery had gone quiet. Even the students had stopped scribbling in their notebooks. Reyes handed her another document. "Please explain this email," he said. Karoline took it. "This was sent 2 days before the fundraiser. It's from Bellamy to the defendant stating, 'Once we move Karoline out of the picture, the board will be a lot more flexible.'" Pierre stopped flipping his pen. "You obtained this legally?" Reyes nodded. "Through discovery, Your Honor." There was a pause. The judge's jaw tensed, but Karoline wasn't done. "What I didn't realize," she said, holding the paper, "was that this wasn't just a personal attack. It was business. I was in the way, and someone made sure to push me out." Judge Pierce rubbed his forehead. "Miss Leavitt, even if what you're saying holds merit, this court isn't designed to referee gossip." Karoline held a stare. "It's not gossip when there's a paper trail." For the first time, there was a flicker of discomfort behind the judge's smug exterior. Then came a soft knock on the courtroom door. A clerk entered quietly, handed a note to Pierce, and exited. He opened it, read it, folded it once, and set it aside. "Continue," he said, voice flatter than before. Karoline pointed to the sealed folder still sitting on the bench. "The folder contains financial disclosures submitted by Judge Pierce during the previous fiscal year," she said. The room didn't breathe. Ray has cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we are submitting this as a formal exhibit. The contents pertain directly to the court's ability to remain impartial in this case." Judge Pierce's face changed slightly, subtly. "But enough, I'm sorry. What exactly are you insinuating?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Karoline didn't raise her voice. We're not insinuating anything, Your Honor. We're submitting evidence. The folder includes documentation linking you to a financial interest in the defendant's firm through a third-party equity group registered in Massachusetts. You signed the disclosure yourself 6 months ago. Now the silence wasn't tension, it was disbelief. I'd like to request a recess, Rhea said calmly, so the court can consider whether recusal is appropriate. Pierre stood up. He didn't pound the gavel, he didn't shout, he just stared at Karoline, then at the folder. You've made your point. He turned and walked out through the side door without another word, but no one in the room had any doubt this wasn't over. It was just getting started. The door shut behind Judge Pierce with a hollow thud, leaving a silence that was heavier than anything Karoline had said. People whispered. A few heads turned toward Karoline. She stayed seated, eyes forward. She didn't move like someone who just made a bold accusation. She moved like someone who'd finally put down a weight she'd carried too long. Malcolm Reyes leaned toward her and whispered, "That was the moment. You okay?" She gave the slightest nod. "I just want the truth to stick this time." 10 minutes passed before the side door opened again, not with Pierce, but with a different face. Judge Andrea Teller, one of the county's senior alternates, walked in reading from a file as she made her way to the bench. No robe, just a gray blazer and a look that said she didn't like surprises. She sat down and addressed the room. "Due to an administrative concern involving the presiding judge, I've been assigned to review the matter and determine whether further steps are necessary. All current proceedings are paused until I've reviewed the record and verified the facts presented." Raya stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. We're prepared to assist in any way necessary." Teller didn't nod or smile. She simply said, "I'm not here for pleasantries. I'm here to make sure nothing inappropriate has occurred under this court's authority." She flipped open the sealed folder. Her expression didn't change, but her pace slowed with each page she read. Karoline sat still, clutching her hands in her lap. Her voice had carried her through the fire, but now it was out of her hands. The judge read in silence for nearly 5 minutes. Then she looked up. "Miss Leavitt, I want to confirm you obtained these records through public financial disclosures." "Yes, Your Honor," Karoline answered. "They're archived through the New Hampshire Office of Judicial Conduct. I also cross-referenced them with public shareholder records from Massachusetts." Teller looked toward the court clerk. "Record that statement." Then she addressed the room. "I will be calling a recess while I contact the state's Commission on Judicial Conduct for immediate guidance. If what's in this folder is accurate, there is a non-trivial conflict of interest in this case." You could feel the air shift. There wasn't not outrage, just quiet acknowledgement that something real was happening, something that most people never see in courtrooms like this. A judge being scrutinized not for bias, but for potentially sitting on a case where he had a personal financial stake. As people filed out for recess, a man in a denim jacket and horn-rimmed glasses approached Karoline. He looked like someone who didn't belong in a courtroom, maybe a college professor, maybe a journalist. "You're Leavitt?" he asked softly. "Yes, I've been covering this court for a few years," he said. "Never seen someone put Pierce on his heels like that." Karoline didn't smile. "It's not about getting under his skin, it's about making sure people like him stop thinking they can play with other people's lives." He nodded, scribbled something in a small notepad, and walked off. Outside, the air was cool and dry. The granite steps of the courthouse were lined with students, attorneys, and one local news van that had just pulled up after catching wind of what happened inside. Reyes came out and stood beside him. "You did good," he said. "He'll fight back," she replied. "Guys like that don't just disappear quietly." "No," Reyes said, "but you made the first crack. Now we'll see what slips through." But just as they were speaking, a staffer rushed through the main doors, her face pale, her phone in hand, in a single sentence on her lips. "There's been a leak." The word leak spread through the crowd outside faster than anything Karoline had said on the record. Phones buzzed, eyes widened. Someone whispered, "It's online," and within seconds people were scrolling, reading, sharing. Reyes looked at the staffer where she handed him her phone, already open to a local legal blog. Granite Justice Watch. The headline read, "Breaking Judge Ronald Pierce linked to investment group backing defendant in ongoing defamation case." Below that, screenshots, excerpts from the very documents Karoline had submitted in court. Red circles highlighting Pierce's name, his signature, and the stake held through a third-party fund registered under Merriman Holdings. Karoline leaned in, reading over Raya's shoulder. This wasn't supposed to be public, yet he muttered. Teller hadn't even ruled. Karoline kept her eyes on the screen. Someone wanted this out now. It wasn't just the legal community catching wind of it. Within an hour we had a breaking segment by lunch. National blogs were picking it up, with headlines like "Judge accused of sitting on case involving firm he secretly invested in conflict of interest. Bombshell rocks New Hampshire courtroom inside. Judge Teller called court back to order." The room buzzed with tension. Karoline, Reyes, and even the defendant's team looked rattled, not because of the case, but because the story had escaped the courthouse walls. Teller sat calmly. She waited for everyone to settle before speaking. "The court is aware that elements of this case, including documents submitted earlier today, have been leaked to the public. While that was not sanctioned, it does not change the material facts we are reviewing." She looked directly at the defense attorney, a polished woman named Elise Bram, who hadn't said much until now. Elise, Teller said, "Your client is aware of this investment relationship with Judge Pierce, correct?" Bram shifted uncomfortably. "We were not aware it was active, Your Honor. To our understanding, Merriman Holdings was a passive equity vehicle and not directly involved with the defense's operations." Teller didn't blink. "But your client was aware of the connection." Elise hesitated, then spoke carefully. "We'll need time to confirm that fully." Karoline looked at Reyes, whose jaw was tight. "Your Honor," he said, "we request immediate recusal of Judge Pierce from any involvement with this case, retroactive or otherwise, in a full review of previous rulings he issued that may have been influenced." "Tell her not at once, it's already in motion." And just like that, everything changed. The Arrogant laughter from earlier that morning was now a distant memory. The man who once mocked Karoline's career, who leaned back like he owned the bench, was nowhere in sight. Word had spread that Pierce had left the courthouse shortly after recess and hadn't returned. Unconfirmed reports said he'd been seen speaking with two men in suits in the courthouse parking garage. His office phone had gone straight to voicemail. Back inside the courtroom, Teller continued, "I've sent a formal notice to the Judicial Conduct Commission requesting emergency review. If the allegations are confirmed, Judge Pierce may be removed from the bench pending a full ethics investigation." Someone in the gallery gasped. Elise Bram sat down, clearly rattled. Her client sitting behind her whispered something into her ear. Elise turned red. Karoline leaned toward Rose again. "You think he'll actually be removed?" "Depends," he said. "If this is the only conflict, maybe not, but if they dig and find more." Karoline didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. She didn't want revenge, she wanted change. But outside that courtroom, Pierce's name was already trending, and that kind of attention doesn't go away quietly. The next 48 hours felt like something out of a political drama, except this wasn't scripted, and the consequences were very real. By Tuesday morning, the Judicial Conduct Commission had released a preliminary statement confirming that Judge Pierce's disclosures would undergo a full review. The term they used, potential breach of impartiality, was just a professional way of saying he might have crossed the line. Karoline sat at a coffee shop near Victory Park with Rose barely touching her drink. Her phone kept vibrating. Reporters, friends, people she hadn't heard from in years, all asking the same thing. "Did you know it would blow up like this?" "No," she told Reyes. "I didn't think it would go this far. I just wanted him off the case. I wasn't trying to ruin the man's life." Reyes stirred his coffee. "He did that on his own. You just showed people the light switch." Pierce hadn't spoken publicly, but that didn't stop speculation. A local news crew caught him ducking into a law office on Hanover Street, looking every bit like someone being coached by a crisis manager. No robe, no arrogance, just a man trying not to look cornered. Later that day, Judge Teller reconvened the court to assign a new presiding judge for the defamation case. It was quiet in the room. No smirks, no sarcasm, no distractions, just the facts. The case will resume under Judge Patrick Dwyer. Teller announced the court will also be issuing an order to preserve all prior communications and decisions made under Judge Pierce's supervision. Bram stood up, visibly uneasy. "Your Honor, we request a delay in proceedings until our team can review any potential procedural irregularities from Judge Pierce's handling of pre-trial motions." Teller didn't object. She simply said, "That's your right, but this case is moving forward." Karoline watched from the bench. It was surreal watching everything shift so fast. The courtroom that once felt stacked against her was finally neutral, not in her favor, not against her, just fair. Afterward, as they stepped outside, a reporter caught up to her. "Karoline, do you have any comment on what this means for the larger legal system in New Hampshire?" She paused. The camera light was on the mic too close to her face. "I think people forget that the system is made up of individuals," she said, "and when those individuals stop being accountable, the whole system gets infected. I didn't do this to expose anyone. I did it because I was tired of pretending like my voice didn't matter." Later that evening, the story made national cable news. The spin varied depending on the channel. Some called her brave, others called the situation political, but the one thing they all agreed on: it was rare for someone to hold a judge accountable in open court and walk away not only unshaken but vindicated. Meanwhile, Judge Pierce's name quietly disappeared from two scheduled hearings that week. His chambers remained closed for personal leave, though insiders whispered that he'd been told to stay away while the ethics board completed their inquiry. There were rumors, more than rumors really, about past cases he may have handled with similar conflicts, one in Keene, another in Portsmouth. Defense attorneys were already combing through court logs to see if they'd missed something. Back in Reyes's office, Karoline sat across from him, arms crossed. "What happens if they find more?" she asked. "They'll dig deeper, and if enough turns up, he won't be coming back. Not to the bench, not to anything." With a gavel, she looked out the window where downtown Manchester moved on like nothing had happened, but she knew better. Something had shifted. But while Karoline had stood up for herself, others were just starting to realize how much they'd let slide, and now they'd have to ask why. It had been 2 weeks since Karoline Leavitt sat in that courtroom and cracked open the kind of silence most people are taught not to touch. Since then, life hadn't exactly gone back to normal, but it hadn't fallen apart either. Some days it felt like she'd started something she couldn't control, other days like she'd finally given herself permission to stop shrinking. She stood alone outside the courthouse one morning, looking at the stone steps that once felt taller than they really were. A light breeze cut through the air, and she tugged her coat a little tighter. No cameras this time, no reporters, just her inside. Her case had resumed under Judge Dwyer. No theatrics, no underhanded smiles, just a fair hearing and a docket that moved without drama. Her defamation suit was finally being taken seriously. Facts were being weighed, not personalities. Reyes joined her out front, sipping a takeout coffee. "They're voting on it today," he said. "The commission?" she asked. He nodded. "Formal recommendation to suspend Pierce pending full investigation. They'll probably announce by Friday." Karoline didn't cheer. She didn't pump her fist or show any sense of triumph. Instead, she let out a quiet breath, as if she'd been holding it for far too long. "You know what's wild?" she said. "When I first came to you, I just wanted to clear my name. That's all. I wasn't trying to take anyone down. I know," Rhea said. "And you didn't." He took himself down the minute he thought the rules didn't apply to him that night. She found herself rereading the first letter her former client had sent, the one pulling out of her contract after the rumor spread. One line still hit hard: "We just can't afford to take risks on someone whose credibility is in question." Funny, no one had questioned Pierce's credibility when he smirked at her that day in court. Karoline had always thought justice came with closure, but she was learning it didn't always look clean. Sometimes it came in fragments, one truth at a time with space between. Each step by Friday afternoon, the Judicial Conduct Commission made it official Judge Ronald Pierce was placed on indefinite administrative leave. The investigation into his ties to Merriman Wong Holdings had widened to include other financial disclosures going back 3 years. No charges yet, but the scrutiny wasn't letting up. People started talking about him in the past tense. Karoline didn't celebrate. She didn't attend the press briefing. Outside the commission's building, she stayed at her office, writing a simple post on her professional page. Truth matters even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. Within minutes the comments started pouring in. Former clients, colleagues, even strangers. Most were kind, some weren't, but what mattered was that she hadn't stayed silent, and that wasn't just for her, it was for everyone watching who thought silence was the only option. Later that weekend she met Reyes at the same coffee shop near Victory Park. Do you regret it? He asked her, stirring sugar into his mug. Karoline thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. No, if I had kept my head down and let it pass, I'd still be working half hours, being polite, hoping no one Googled me. Now I get to look people in the eye again. Ray has nodded slowly. Sometimes standing up doesn't change everything, but it changes you, and that's where it starts. They sat in silence for a minute, not needing to say more. Karoline smiled, not big, not proud, just real. Because in the end she hadn't just told the truth in court. She reminded people what it looks like when you refuse to be small. If this story meant something to you, share it, speak up, because sometimes the biggest shift starts with the quietest voice. And if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, we've got more real stories to tell.